Okay, I have a ton of stuff that I want to get through so we are not falling too far behind. So I'm trying to squeeze it all in. Okay, so be ready for a long one. Okay, Vayeishev. Let's get in. Genesis 37, verse 1. Now Jacob dwelt, Vayeishev, in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. Chapter 37 through 50 is the longest uninterrupted narrative in the book of Genesis, seemingly interrupted, quote, quote, only by the Judah and Tamar story episode in chapter 38. And we are going to focus on that a little more at the end. And I want to get that part in because I think it's important. So we have 13 chapters, all Joseph, because Joseph is important. Joseph is the end of the beginning, and he's also the beginning of the end. On the surface level, in the natural, at face value, the story of Joseph is mainly the story of a dysfunctional family, the completely broken relationship with his brothers, the sons of Jacob / Israel, a tragic and painful family affair, but it is a tragedy with God right in the middle of it. 4 times in chapters 39, in verse 2, 3, 21, and 23, it says, and Yahweh was with Joseph. That being the case, we can make certain basic assumptions. There is a reason and divine purpose for it all, specifically when it comes to Joseph's innocent suffering. Because there is a divine purpose for it all, Joseph will make it through, and therefore God's purpose will be fulfilled. The story will end well because Yahweh was with Joseph. And of course, all of these are messianic shadows. Prophetically, the story of Joseph serves as a pattern for the final reconciliation of Yeshua with his estranged brothers. In the Joseph story, there are many very interesting linguistic nuggets. And here also we find several words and phrases that are used for the first time here, even though we are nearing the end of Genesis. They are only used in these Joseph passages, and therefore we have to pay attention to those. They're not the usual words used in other passages, and words that specifically point to the end of days. So this is a preview or a blueprint of how things are going to unfold or may unfold. We don't know. And phrases that are repeated verbatim in the Beit HaTorah. The story of Joseph uniquely parallels and foreshadows the redemptive story of Yeshua. It is noteworthy, though, that the apostolic writers never directly identify Joseph as foreshadowing the Messiah. What is their model? Moshe. Yeshua, the promised prophet like Moshe, the greater Moshe, and the attached warning, to him shall you listen, and if you will not, I will require it of you. The one who would have the last word, not the rabbis, and his word will and still stands. Will stand and it still stands. The obvious parallels between the life of Joseph and the life of Yeshua speak for themselves. There are lists out there of hundreds parallels. They're very superficial. Like both had to go down to Egypt, both were loved by their fathers, both were hated by their brothers, both suffered innocently, etc., etc. But then there are also very subtle ones, allusions that are not visible in any other language or on the pshat level, great messianic shadows. And these are they are much more fruitful to explore as always. When it comes to the story of Joseph, many commentaries point out the quote-unquote inappropriate or uncalled for actions of all involved, focusing on what they did wrong, what they should not have done, and why. For example, Jacob should not have favored one son over all the others. He should not have given Joseph this special garment. Joseph should not have given a bad report about his brothers to his fathers. And Chumash is right there. This is where they come in. That's what their point is. Joseph should not have presented his dreams to his brothers and provoked them to jealousy. Jacob should not have sent him to look for his brothers. The brothers should not have sold him. They should not have deceived their father, etc., etc., etc. but they did. And why do all these tragic events happen? Why do things never seem to go smoothly? And where is God in all of this? It becomes very clear in the Joseph narrative that it is exactly these quote-unquote mistakes, the things they shouldn't have done, that ultimately get Joseph to Egypt, where he is destined to be, in order to become their savior. So that's a totally different angle to look at the story. I want to look at some of the hidden prophetic clues at the very beginning of the passage. So let's start at the very beginning of the Joseph story. Rachel in Genesis 30, verse 24. So she called his name Joseph, and said, Yahweh shall add Yasav to me another son. And Yasav means to add or to increase. This was fulfilled with the birth of Benjamin, Genesis 35:18. And so it was, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni. Oni means sorrow, trouble. But his father called him Binyamin, meaning son of the right hand. The death of Rachel gave Jacob his 12th and last son, the only one born in the land of Canaan. Jacob changed the name to Benjamin. Genesis 35:11. Also God said to him, I am El Shaddai, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body. Just after God had given Jacob the additional name Israel, he promised that kings would come from Jacob. This promise would be fulfilled through Israel's first king, King Saul, who was a Benjamite. Now from First Fruits of Zion. Rachel's travail during the birth of Benjamin portend the birth pangs of Messiah. The name Benoni foreshadows Messiah in his first coming, Messiah ben Joseph. The name Benjamin foreshadows Messiah in his second coming, Messiah ben David. So here again we have a 2-in-1. Son of my trouble, Benoni, aptly describes the rabbinic idea of Messiah ben Joseph, who rises up to make war against the enemies of Israel and dies for the sins of the nation. It describes the first coming of Yeshua, who brought the sword of judgment to the nation. Matthew 10:34, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. His appearance heralded and set in motion a time of judgment. The great exile and all the calamity that has befallen the Jewish people for the last 2,000 years began with Yeshua. He said it, and it was so. He was the cause, and only he will be the remedy. He has been and still is a son of trouble for Israel. When he returns, the nation of Israel will recognize Yeshua as the one seated at the right hand of the Father. Jacob alluded to this when he renamed the son of my trouble as the son of my right hand. The Psalms refer to the Messiah as the man of your right hand. Psalm 80, verse 17. Let your hand be upon the man of your right hand, upon the Son of Man whom you made strong for yourself. Psalm 110, verse 1. Sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. Matthew 26:64. Yeshua said to him, that's Caiaphas, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. What was the reaction? He tore his clothes because he interpreted it right and said it's blasphemy, which calls for the death penalty. 1 Peter 3:22. Messiah, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, angels and authority and powers having been made subject to him. The authorities and powers are the principalities and powers in the heavenlies. Okay? Next, Genesis 30, 7, verse 2a. And these are the generations of Jacob. Remember, here it says, Elei toldot Yaakov Yosef. These are the generations of Jacob, Joseph. Remember, in Hebrew, there are no periods or commas. Okay? So in Hebrew, it says, Ve'ele toldot Yaakov Yosef. In the normal toldot, you would expect who? These are the generations of Jacob. No. Reuben, right? The firstborn of his first wife, Leah. But it is Joseph, Jacob's 11th son, the firstborn of Rachel. So the opening verse, immediately, the opening verse of the Joseph cycle opens the stage for trouble. The way it is phrased is unusual. Whenever this is the case, there is a purpose to it. Torah is trying to tell us something. So the first thing we notice is the close connection between Jacob and Joseph, and we had the same, similar, not phrased the same, but similar with Abraham and Isaac. Rabbi Ari Khan says, the link between Jacob and Joseph is spelled out from the start. Of all his sons specifically, Joseph holds the key to Jacob's legacy. The generations, the toldot of Jacob, will be fulfilled in Joseph. In other words, it is to show us that from this point on, the generations of Jacob/Israel are in the hands of Joseph. Their destiny, everything is in the hands of Joseph. But the problem is, Joseph is only 17 years old at the time. But there is another rabbinic teaching concerning this verse, concerning Jacob, Joseph. It's looked at from a different angle. And this one is very telling because it will bring more light to some key scriptures in the Brit. Jewish commentators explain that Jacob and Joseph are one. So the father and the son are one. So we have another one of those two-in-ones. The Talmud teaches that the son is a limb of the father. Yitzhak Kazdan, who is a contemporary rabbi, explains the passage. Indeed, this is the underpinning of the concept in the Gemara, Sanhedrin 104a. A son brings merit to his father through good deeds, learning Torah, etc. He does so because a son is considered an extension, literally a leg of his father, either because the son and father are part and parcel of each other's, i.e., are joined together, or because the father is considered the gorem, the cause of his son's actions, i.e., since the son emulates him by following in his footsteps. In other words, the son's actions and accomplishments are considered as the father's and are credited to the father. And here we can put all kinds of scriptures, and I have, I think, 4. Let's look at them next. John 5:19. Then Yeshua answered and said to them, most assuredly I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son also does in like manner. John 5:30. I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. John 6:38. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but to do the will of him who sent me. And John 10:37-38. If I do not do the works of my Father, do not believe me. But if I do, though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and believe that the Father is in me and I in him. Next, so I'm going to run through this. We have to cover the basics of Joseph, and then we go to the rest. Who was Joseph shepherding? There is another nugget about Joseph in this verse 2, which is important to the person of Yeshua. There is a grammatical ambiguity. Genesis 37:10 2b, Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding or shepherding the flock with his brothers. And you see here in the Hebrew, we have an 8. Ro'e, 8. Achav, Batzon. Okay? In this context, the 8 can be considered, as in most cases, a direct object marker. Okay? Like, for example, do I have that here? Yes. Like in the phrase, Joseph brought what? The object, a bad report, it. Okay? It's another example. So, if we take it as the object marker, then it would be like this. Joseph was shepherding his brothers with or among the flock. Okay? So, then of course we have to ask, we always have to ask questions. Was Joseph working as a shepherd when he was 17 years old in the fields among his brothers who were also shepherds? Or was Joseph at the age of 17 already looking out for, taking care of, and tending or shepherding his brothers among the flock? And the answer is yes, another 2 in 1. He was among them and over them. So on a deeper level, we can, from this little grammatical nugget, we learn that even at the young age of only 17, Joseph had begun to shepherd and to lead his family, a leadership role that is, of course, very much resented by all of his older brothers. Yeshua calls himself the good shepherd. He never calls himself the good carpenter. Right? Remember that. He calls himself the good carpenter. And people would say, good shepherd? So Yeshua calls himself the promised good shepherd in John 10, as opposed to the bad shepherds of Israel in Ezekiel 34. This is important. This is a good chapter to read. Because when he comes on the scene and says, I'm the good shepherd, they have a reference point. Okay? And what the good shepherd is going to do, that is explained in Ezekiel 34. So read the chapter, please. Joseph is already standing out, not only as his father's favorite, but there is a reason that he is his father's favorite. As we've seen so far in the past, the firstborn is not the natural firstborn, but he is the spiritual firstborn. He is the one that has the spiritual potential, which over time has to develop into the spiritual maturity needed to carry on the covenant. And this is Joseph already at 17. Why 17 years old? Why does Torah specify Joseph's age of 17? That is very, very unusual. Usually in the Toldot, if an age is given, it is the age of the progenitor. So here in the Joseph account, we have something very unusual. This is the kind of an anomaly that calls for our attention. When it is not normal, it's intentional and on purpose and for a reason and important. So we have Jacob, Joseph, and 17. The number 17 is only mentioned twice in all of Torah. Again, in Genesis 37, verse 28. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the number 17 connects the two, the father and the son, in a unique way. This is, in and of itself, very noteworthy. So 17, of course, is the numerical value for Tov. So there must be something good about Joseph, 17, and Tov. Okay, next, the bad report. Genesis 37, verse 2. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, that would be Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, that would be Gad and Asher. his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Okay. Chumash has evil reports, plural. It's singular in the text. Okay? So, commentary. Evil reports about them. Whatever misbehavior Joseph noted in Leah's sons, he reported to Jacob. So that sounds like he was habitually doing that, so he was a notorious snitch. Right? That's not what the text says. That an evil report says one. This was one reason they came to hate him. The other reasons are in the following verses, in dreams, concerning the dreams and the tunic. However, as the Midrash, not the text, as the Midrash explains, Joseph misinterpreted their actions, and they were innocent of charges. That's Rashi, of course. Although Joseph was sincere in his faulty evaluation, he was at fault because he should have given them the benefit of the doubt and reported all the facts to Jacob without forming his own negative conclusion. Well, I have a question here. How did you come up with this interpretation without forming your own negative conclusion? Okay? So, do you see what is going on here? Of course, the sons of Jacob can't do wrong. Of course, Joseph was at fault. They are never wrong. Okay? And they twist and turn it to make it fit. But that is the bigger picture. Minimizing the stature, the importance, and the prophetic significance of Joseph. So, okay, let's correct this. Joseph first incited his brother's anger when he brought a bad report, singular, about some misbehavior on their part. Whatever it was, we are not told. But this develops into a pattern, because the same type of criticism often put the prophets, the messengers of God, at odds with the people. The people didn't want to hear the bad report because they thought they weren't that bad. The prophets came with messages of rebuke, attempting to correct the nation for its sins and call them to repentance. And that is called a covenant lawsuit. This is an official thing. They didn't like the message, and so they often killed the messenger. Their prophecies delivered bad reports about the true state of Israel's behavior and spiritual condition within the framework of covenant. That's crucial. Everything within the framework of covenant, because they stepped out. And then we come to Yeshua, the prophet of all prophets, who followed in the same prophetic tradition, who brought the ultimate bad report, and he condemned his generation for their absolute wickedness and refusal to repent. And he did not mince words. Of course, his fierce prophetic rhetoric, his way of proclaiming the truth, won him no love from the religious authorities in Jerusalem, and they soon hated him as much as Joseph's brothers hated him. John 8:40 says, "But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from God." Who is next? At this juncture in Bereshit, we don't know who the covenant blessing will go to in Jacob's family. The question of succession has not come up yet. Usually it is indicated by something: he was old and advanced in years, or was about to die, or something like that. But we are not there yet, so there's no indication here. So far, the covenant has been passed from Abram to Isaac to Jacob, and the choice has always been between only two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau. But now the situation is different. From the pattern, we know that the covenant blessing was not given to the firstborn. So which of Jacob's many sons would be chosen to carry it on after him? Some of them, number 1 through 3, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, have already disqualified themselves by their actions. But at this point in the narrative, succession is not an issue yet. But then suddenly, everything changes when Joseph receives this very special coat or tunic, and this must have come as a shock to the brothers and totally unexpected to everyone. And now at this point in the narrative, it appears that the chosen one is indeed Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob, the firstborn of Rachel, who is only 17. This always comes up again and again and again. Now let's look at the tunic, the coat, the garment that triggers all these emotions and hatred and sets in motion all subsequent events in the life of Joseph. Ketonet pasim. Next. Genesis 37, verse 1. Now Jacob dwelt. Verse 2, this is the history or the genealogy of Jacob. And verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. So here we have the first switch from Jacob to Israel. And I need to remind you of this. You need to pay attention to the switching back and forth between the names Jacob and Israel. And this is one of these places. And here we would have expected the name Jacob because of the very concrete, the very limited, the very family-related context. Right? Okay. Rabbi Ari Khan notes, it is interesting that here the text uses the name Israel as opposed to Jacob, implying that the love was not just sentimental, but on a national level. End quote. So, this is bigger. The story gets bigger. National ramifications, prophetic context. So the picture gets bigger. Okay? It is the story, yes, but it's bigger than that. Okay? We'll find this switch in some key places in the Joseph narrative. It was also Israel who sent Joseph to check on his brothers in verse 13. These are the kinds of things we need to pay attention to. The Palestinian Targum says, and Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons because the likeness of Joseph resembled his own, and he made him a figured robe, whatever that means. So what does it mean? The likeness of Joseph resembled his own. Was Joseph more the Jacob kind of son, while the others were more the Esau kind of sons? Did he love him because of that? Ketunet pasim. A coat of what? A coat of? You don't want to say it. Good. Also, he made him a ketunet pasim of, where is it? Next. Of colors. Okay. So many is not in the text, and neither is colors. Okay. One thing we can say is that Joseph didn't look like that. Okay, for sure. They had some more taste. It was probably with a little color embroidered or whatever, but that's not the point. It wasn't like that. Okay? So, what is ketunet pasim? We have covered this in great detail in the past, so I'm just hitting some of the major points. Ketunet means tunic or robe, and first mention, I think I have these. Next. Yes. First mentioned Genesis 3:21. Also for Adam and his wife, Yahweh God made tunics of skin and clothed them. And the word pas, from which we get pasim, means flat of the hand or foot, palm, sole, or the tunic reaching to palms and soles figuratively. So they have to try to make some sense. Bottom line, We do not really know what it means, but everybody has a picture in their minds, right? If you close your eyes and say Joseph and his whatever, then something comes up with color. Here I have some different translations. Tunic or coat of many colors. Coat of many colors. This is usually the one you go by. This is the most popular translation, but again, the least likely. A fine woolen tunic, that's what the Chumash has. Long sleeve robe. The OJB has ketonet pasim, tunic reaching to palms and soles. Young's literal translation, a long coat, and the Amplified, a distinctive long tunic with sleeves. So whatever the distinctive part is, richly ornamented or whatever with some colors, we do not know. But the common denominator in all of these translations is, apart from the New King James, which is the popular one, the common denominator is no color, no mention of color, right? But that's exactly what's in your mind, what Hollywood emphasizes, and what all the pictures show. Okay? And I don't know what it is that we always remember so well the stuff that is not right. Always. The major characteristics, according to many scholars, seems to be the length of the tunic, an expression of status and dignity and authority, and that is most likely what his brothers would have seen. In general, in the ancient Near East, long sleeves and long tunics were a sign of one who did not have to work physically, a sign of dignity, while laborers wore shorter garments. A person of high status or royalty demonstrated his position by wearing long tunics and long sleeves. And all of that makes sense because chasing goats and chasing sheep with long garments is not really very convenient. So, question. Now that Joseph has this garment, what does that mean? Was Joseph wearing this special garment all the time from now on? Or only on special occasions to make his brothers mad with him? Does this mean that from that point on, he didn't have to work anymore? That he was no longer with his brothers among the flock? And this, of course, must have made them mad as hell. As the saying goes, clothes make the man. So to this day, for example, judges in many countries still wear long robes, and so do many priests in the traditional churches. Next time the word kitunet appears is in the description of the tunic of the high priest. Exodus 28 verse 4, and these are the garments which they shall make: a breastplate and an ephod, a robe, a skillful woven tunic, a turban, and a sash. So they shall make holy garments for Aaron, your brother, and his sons, and that he may minister to me as priest. So this would allude to the priestly role and function of this kind of kitunet. Remember, before the Levitical priesthood was established after the incident of the golden calf, the firstborn had the role of priest of the family. This would most likely have been the interpretation of the brothers when they saw this priestly garment on only 17-year-old Joseph, which would then have triggered even more hatred towards him. Kitunet Pasim occurs only one more time in the entire Tanakh in the story of Amnon and Tamar. There, this robe definitely signifies special distinction. It says, the king's virgin daughters wore such apparel. That's 2 Samuel 13, verse 18. It seems as this robe was destined to be a harbinger of the coming tragedy. Both stories are tragic. Joseph was sold, Tamar was raped. The brothers stripped Joseph of his tunic and ripped it. Tamar tore her tunic. Friedman commentary says, it is hardly coincidental that the two people who wear a ketonet pasim in the Bible are both victims of violence by their brothers, and that both coats are torn. The significance of the coat, therefore, is a symbol of injustice among siblings. Next, Genesis 37, verse 4. Shalom. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. The peaceably in the New King James, literally, Friedman says, to speak to him of peace. It appears to refer to the standard Hebrew greetings. One says shalom, peace or well-being, for hello, and one says shalom lo, does he have peace, for how is he? That is what in Genesis 29, verse 6, Jacob at the well in Padam Aram asking for Laban's well-being. So how is it? That is, the brothers cannot even bid him hello or ask how he is. So, and this to me sounds worse than just being able to speak peacefully. This is rendered ironic by the fact that Joseph's father will soon send him to check on his brothers, telling him, see how your brothers are. Genesis 37:14. Then he, Israel, said to them, please go and see if it is well, shalom, with your brothers, and well, shalom, with the flocks, and bring back word to me. It is rendered doubly ironic later when Joseph tells Pharaoh that it is possible to interpret Pharaoh's dreams because, quote, God will answer regarding Pharaoh's well-being, shalom, suggesting that God shows even more care for Pharaoh's well-being than Joseph's brothers are able to show to him, end quote. Genesis 43:27 and 28. Then he asked them about their well-being, shalom, and said, is your father well, shalom, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? And they answered, your servant, our father, is in good health, shalom. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. Now the brothers finally speak shalom. Even though it is unwittingly, it is the beginning of their reconciliation with their brothers. So we have a shalom thread through the Joseph story. That's the point. Why is that important? Because one of Messiah's names is Sar Shalom. Right. Ephesians 2:13 and 14. But now in Messiah Yeshua, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Messiah, for he himself is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the middle wall of separation. David Stern says, not only does Yeshua make peace between Jews and Gentiles, but he himself is that peace. He, believing Jews and Gentiles, is what has made both one, for our oneness is the one Messiah living in both. And I like to add one more scripture here, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 18 and 19. Now all things are of God, who has reconciled us to himself through Yeshua the Messiah, and has given us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, that God was in Messiah reconciling the world to himself, not putting their trespasses to them, and not imputing their trespasses to them, and has committed to us the word of reconciliation. And that word is shalom. Next, sinat chinam. Genesis 37, verses 4 through 8. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated, and the word is sane, him, and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. And the word for more here is yasaf. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I've dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? And the answer is yes. Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? And the answer is yes, of course. So they hated him even more, Yasav, for his dreams and for his words. So the word sane, to hate, remember, it also means to be unloved or less loved. Is used 7 times in the book of Genesis, 3 times in Genesis 37, and that's the last time in Genesis. In the text, there is a progression of hate, an increase in the intensity of the hate the brothers felt towards Joseph. And it is interesting that to express this increase, the verb yasaf is used, from which we get Yosef. What does the Torah say later about the issue of hating a brother? Leviticus 19, verses 17 and 18. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Meaning here, love your neighbor is Israelite against Israelite. Okay? That's the community. Not talking about you. Okay. Why did Joseph's brothers hate him so much? Because he is loved by his father. He is loved by his father in a very special and unique way in which they are not. And while they would never admit it, their hatred of Joseph is essentially also, at the same time, a slap in their father's face. When you hate the one whom the father loves, you are in that hatred despising the father himself. John 15:23, he who hates me hates my father also. But remember, love and hate are also covenant terms. Okay? God loved Jacob and hated Esau. So always keep these things, if you still have some room left, somewhere. Okay. Talmud Yoma 9b says, why was the first sanctuary destroyed? Because of 3 evil things which prevailed there. Idolatry, worshiping other gods, immorality, and bloodshed. But why was the second sanctuary destroyed, seeing that in its time they were occupying themselves with Torah, observance of precepts, and the practice of charity? Because therein prevailed hatred without cause. That teaches you that groundless hatred is considered as of even gravity with the 3 sins of idolatry, immorality, and bloodshed together. That's the concept of sinat chinam. Sinat chinam is usually translated baseless hatred or hate without a cause. And we have the verb sane, and chinam, without a cause, in vain, or for nothing. Now some scriptures where this concept is expressed. Psalm 35, verse 19. Let them not rejoice over me who are wrongfully my enemies, nor let them wink with the eye who hate me without a cause. And Psalm 69, verse 4. Those who hate me without a cause are more than the hairs on my head. They are mighty who would destroy me, being my enemies wrongfully. Though I have stolen nothing, I still must restore it. And John 15:25. I only have this part, but I want to read the whole passage. John 15:18 through 25. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you, would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But all these things they will do to you for my name's sake, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would have no sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works which no one else did, they would have no sin. But now they have seen and also hated both me and my Father. But this happened that the word might be fulfilled, which is written in their law, they hated me without a cause. Quoting from the Psalms. Okay? So, that was Sinat Chinam. Next, the sale of Joseph. The sale of Joseph constitutes a turning point in the life of Joseph and the history of the sons of Jacob, Israel, because it marks the beginning of their descent into Egypt. Genesis 37, verses 13 through 17. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was, Hine, wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, what are you seeking? Oh, there are several things in here. Okay. The Targum says, Gabriel, in the likeness of a man, found him wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? Okay, they interpret this man to be Gabriel. We had the man and a man appear, for example, in Ezekiel or in other scriptures as a somehow divine being. But the point here is, if it was Gabriel and it was an angel, he didn't have wings. Okay. Verse 16. So he said, I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, they have departed from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Dothan is significant in the biblical narrative as the location where Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. And this is where the descent into Egypt began. And we have to look at the map. Okay. Oh, that's small. Ooh. Oh, this is very glary. Here is Dothan, right? Okay. Dothan. So we have several routes here. So this is an important strategic location north of Shechem. Oh, before I forget it, we have, for the later story, we have Adullam in the Judah and Tamar story, the Adullamite, and they go shearing the sheep in Timnah. Okay, so you have an idea. They were in Hebron and they go down. Okay, remember this. Okay, so Dothan is strategically important because there are three major trade routes. We have the King's Highway. The King's Highway is on the east side. It's not here. So that's the mountain ridge that goes up to the Gilead. East of the the Jordan. Then we have the central ridge, that's this route that he went, and then we have the sea route. Okay? So the King's Highway to the east of the Jordan, the central ridge route through the hill country, and the way by the sea through the plain. Dothan was on the international trade route that ran from the northeast down to Egypt. If the brothers had stayed in Shem, they would have missed the Ishmaelite caravan. Okay? And if the man had not appeared and sent Joseph to Dothan, he would most likely have returned to his father and not ended up in Egypt. So we always need to, when they have a location, we need to make sure we know where that is, because there is usually more behind that. Okay. Genesis 37 next, 21 and 22. But Reuben heard it, so we're going to the we jump ahead a little bit. You are familiar with the story, so I don't have it. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, "Let us not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." Reuben was the firstborn, and he was responsible for his younger brothers, so he was accountable to his father Israel. Verses 26 and 29. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." So selling him is okay, killing him is not. And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. Rabbi Ari Khan says, Jewish tradition refers to the sale of Joseph as a stain on the collective conscience of the entire nation, a stain that much of Jewish practice and Jewish history is geared toward cleansing. It seems an inescapable conclusion that Jewish theology considers the brothers' guilt of the sale and senses the repercussions of that episode throughout our history. What does Scripture say about the issue? Later laws. Exodus 21, verse 16. He who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he is found in his hand, shall surely be put to death. Deuteronomy 24:7. If a man is found kidnapping any of his brethren of the children of Israel and mistreats him or sells him, then that kidnapper shall die, and you shall put away the evil from among you. Rabbi Benjamin Blech from Aish.com said, our sages explain that whenever the Jewish people replicate a sin of the past in their own generation, rather than learning from it, they are condemned for the original sin as well. The sin of the sale of Joseph was that of sinat chinam, needless hatred between Jews. In the time of Roman persecution, the Second Temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam between Jews. The leaders of each generation have a responsibility to educate the masses. For failing to prevent sinat chinam, they were punished. Their crime was the very same crime of the sale of Joseph. They had not learned from the mistakes of previous generations and so had to be punished for that same crime. Question, has anything changed? Now, that part I wanted to get in, and I'm going to get it in. This Judah and Tamar. Okay. On the surface, the Judah-Tamar narrative seems to be an interruption of the Joseph narrative. But at close examination, it is actually pivotal to the development of Judah's character. But not only, there are verbal connections there. I'm not going into this. I have no time for that. Okay. Judah had to experience the pain of a father losing two of his sons to be able to mature to the Judah we will meet in chapter 44, where he stands up against Joseph's request to bring down Benjamin, because now he knows that the pain of losing Benjamin as well would mean his father's death. These passages are all complicated, and there's a lot of debate going on about the chronology. So I'm not going to get in this, but usually from scripture, we can do the math, and it is between 22 years between the sale of Joseph and Jacob moving his family to Egypt. 22 years. But the problem is to fit all the marriages and the children into that time frame. So it may be that it came to pass at that time was before they sold Joseph. So just to let you know, there is an issue, a big issue. Okay, Genesis 38 verses 1 and 2. And it came to pass at that time, and we don't know when that was, that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite, an Ish Adulami, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, an Ish Kenaani, whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. Verse 6 and 7, then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar, but Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh killed him. And verse 10, and the thing which he, that's Onan, the second one, did displeased Yahweh, therefore he killed him also. There is a problem here. These are the usual translations that you find in your English Bible. What is the problem with the killed? Remember what the Chumash says? Caused to die. Okay, this is important because in the Hebrew, the verb is in the he feel form. The he feel form is the causative form, caused to. So God killed him. That just doesn't sound right. Okay, but he caused him to die, and that may happen in different ways. Okay, so this should stun us. This passage here, the beginning of 38, should stun us. Without any transition whatsoever, we have Judah just going out and marrying a Canaanite woman. How come? Okay. So, next, I think I have it here. No, I don't. Okay. So, as you may remember, the Chumash says Judah saw a daughter of a prominent merchant. Okay? All versions, all English versions, including the JPS, have Canaanite, because that is what the text says. Okay? So, here I have, I'm going to quote Dr. Sassoon. Again, I've quoted him many times from exactly this article or paper that he wrote, The Stone Chumash Reviewing Its Torah. Remember, we talked about that several times because he pointed out where the Chumash is very manipulative in some of its translation. And one of the issues is, for example, the stranger versus convert. Okay? So, Judah's father-in-law, not a Canaanite, but a prominent merchant. The Torah describes how Judah left his brothers and moved to the vicinity of an Adullamite man where he met his wife. Genesis 38:2. There Judah saw the daughter of a Canaanite man, Ish Kenaani, whose name was Shua, and he took her as a wife and came unto her. Stone Chumash gives prominent merchant for the words Ish Kanaani. To be sure, Kanaani on its own can denote a merchant, and he gives you the scriptures where it is merchant, but never Ish Kanaani. So Kanaani by itself can mean merchant, depending on the context, but Ish Kanaani cannot. Okay? Nevertheless, Stone Chumash relies on what? The Talmud. Pesachim 58. What does Kanaani mean? If you want to say it means literally a Canaanite, is it possible that Abram warned Isaac not to marry Canaanite, and Isaac warned Jacob, but Judah went and married one? Rather, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said it means the daughter of a merchant, as it says, and then he quotes one of those passages where Kanaani means a merchant, a trader who uses false balances. Or if you like, from here, another one, whose merchants were nobles, whose traders the world honored. Thus the Talmud argues, since elsewhere in Genesis, intermarriage with Canaanites is discountenanced, Judah cannot be allowed to break rank. Therefore, Onkelos and Rashi prefer merchants, and Stone Chumash goes along. So here comes the important one. In so doing, the idea that Genesis 38 might preserve a different attitude to exogamy is withheld from those who rely on the Stone Chumash. Okay. We talked about endogamy. You remember that just a couple of weeks ago? Endogamy means marriage within a specific tribe, clan, or social unit, as it is required by custom or by law. Exogamy is the opposite, marrying outside the tribe, the family, the clan, or the social unit. Okay? We talked about this because if somebody marries outside of the clan, a woman, for example, outside the clan or the tribe, marries someone else, it means that the woman then worship the gods of the husband's family. Okay? Okay. So, and he has two footnotes here, 10 and 11. I have that, yes. While the commentary explains at length its adoption of merchant, it omits the fact that 1 Chronicles 2, verse 3 described Judah's wife as Bat Shua HaKenaanit. Okay, which the ArtScroll Stone Chumash translates as the daughter of Shua, the Canaanitess, not the merchantess. Okay, so here they get it right, but they don't tell you about that. See it? And 11, in Genesis 46:10, which describes Simeon's son Saul as being the son of a Canaanitess. Genesis 46:10. The sons of Simeon were Jemuel, Jamim, Ohad, Yachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. Okay. So, there is a problem. And the Stone Chumash makes that go away. Question is, Tamar, was she or wasn't she? The biblical account of Tamar the daughter-in-law of Judah does not explicitly state her ethnicity. That is clear. But she was most likely a Canaanite. This is inferred from the fact that Judah married a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua, who was a Canaanite man. Tamar was chosen as a wife for his firstborn son, from this Canaanite woman. The narrative implies that Tamar was not of Israelite descent, as Judah later sends her back to her father's house, indicating she was not from an Israelite family. However, there is significant scholarly and rabbinic, of course, debate on this matter, because we can't have that. Some traditions suggest Tamar was not a Canaanite, but a descendant of Shem, the son of Noah, making her a Semite rather than a Canaanite. The Palestinian Targum next is this. And it was at that time, a time of 3 months, that she was known to be with child, and it was told to Yehuda, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath committed fornication, and behold, she is with child by fornication. And Yehuda said, is she not the daughter of a priest? Let her be brought forth and burned. So, some background here. In the tradition, Melchizedek, in Jewish tradition, is Shem. So that would make her, if you say, okay, daughter of a priest, that would make her the daughter of a priest. Why would they think that? Yes, Leviticus 21:9, the daughter of any priest, if she professes herself by playing the harlot, she profanes her father, she shall be burnt with fire. Of course, that law was implemented later, but we don't know what the conventions were at the time. The verse here emphasizes the severe consequence of a priest's daughter engaging in prostitution, as it is seen as a direct affront to who? To her father's holiness and the sanctity of the priesthood. Again, honor and shame, and the honor and shame of the office as well. And then we have another scripture, Leviticus 18, verse 15, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. You shall not uncover her nakedness. And remember, uncover the nakedness is a euphemism for having sexual relations. In the Judah story, that was not what Judah planned. He didn't know about it, okay? But fast forward to our HaTorah portion, to the prophet Amos in the 8th century BC, before the exile of Israel. And he is accusing Israel of doing exactly that. Amos 2:7, a man and his father go into the same girl to defile my holy name. So despite these different traditions, the consensus among most biblical scholars is that Tamar was a Canaanite, as her marriage into Judah's family occurred during a time when intermarriage with Canaanites was common, and her background is not described as Israelite. Hold on. The law against exogamy was only given after the Exodus on the mountain, when Israel had multiplied. That was in Exodus 34, verses 11 through 16. That's Moshe on the mountain with God just before his second descent with the second sets of tablets. And when they were going to build the tabernacle and then move. But then something else happened, and they had to stay and wander around for another 40 years. And then we have Deuteronomy 7, verses 2 through 4. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them, nor shall you make marriage with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. So the anger of Yahweh will be aroused, against you and destroy you suddenly. That is when they had the numbers. In Genesis, they did not have the numbers yet. Okay. I forgot something. I forgot something very important. Another point. Can we go back to Judah and Tamar, the first scriptures? Yes, here. I forgot this one. So the story continues. Judah married a Canaanite woman. And then we have this Adulamite man whose name was Hira. And in verse 12, as time goes by, Judah went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend, the Adulamite. So he lived there, and that was his friend. And he probably had many others. And I wanted to remind you here, I made a note here, but I forgot to say it. Remember going back, Genesis 14. Abram was friends with Mamre, Eshcol, and Aner, who were Amorites, who joined him to get kidnapped Lot back. Okay? Okay. So, now, to the Laban-Jacob covenant, all the way back. Okay, now let's go back to the Laban-Jacob covenant, 2 Torah portions ago, and see how this passage may elucidate the Judah and Tamar passage. Okay, are you ready? Okay. Genesis 29:10. And it came to pass. So we have to go a little further back. It came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brothers. Do you know it now? Okay. 12. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. And then it came to pass when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him. 14. And Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. There is here, if you pay attention, and you should, there is an emphasis here. Okay? These are all familial relational terms, expressing, emphasizing, we have to say here, the blood relationship between the family in Canaan and the family in Padan Aram. Okay? Fast forward 20 years. Genesis 31, verse 20. And Jacob stole away unknown to Laban the Syrian, or the Aramean, it said Arami, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. Okay. Robert Alter says, do I have this? No. For the first time, Laban is given this Gentile identification. The stage is set for the representation of the encounter between Jacob and Laban as a negotiation between national entities. Okay, so the picture is getting bigger. Next, so we're going through the whole story. Genesis 31, 43 through 55. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters and to their children whom they have borne? The answer is nothing. Why? No, because God had appeared to him in a dream and warned him. Now therefore, come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me, So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar, and the word is matzeba. From the IVP commentary. In Canaanite religion, the matzeba, or standing stone, was erected and considered a guardian or a dwelling place of a god. The fact that two are erected here and each is given a name is suggestive of an invoking ritual in which the gods of each party are called to witness the treaty-making ceremony and to enforce its stipulations. While the only explicit charge here is that Jacob not take any more wives, it is suggested by the setting up of the pillars that this is also a boundary agreement and territory is now marked. From the New King James Cultural Background Bible. In the ancient world, these standing stones, these pillars, could at times be deified, i.e., considered to contain the essence of a deity. Others were believed to represent ancestral spirits, whereas others could simply stand as memorials of treaties or special events. The pillar serves, the pillar serves two purposes here: to commemorate the covenant and to mark a territorial boundary. Verse 22, and this stone which I've set as a pillar shall be God's house, Beit Elohim, and of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. That's what he said in Genesis when he before he went to Padan Aram, okay? And he called this pillar Beit Elohim. Okay. See the connection? Connection of God and pillar. Okay? So verse 46. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and the word is gal, and they ate there on the heap. So this is your covenant meal. Laban called it Jegar Zahaduta, which is Aramaic for heap of witness. And Jacob called it Galit, which is Hebrew for heap of witness. And Laban said, this heap is a witness, an aid between you and me this day. Robert Alter. The international character of the transaction is nicely caught in Laban, the Aramean's use of an Aramaic term, while Jacob uses Hebrew. Both names mean mound of witness, which I will not cross over. At this point, the story of bitter familial struggle is also made an etiology for political history. What Laban is designating here is clearly an international border. Okay, so now let's put our term in. We are talking about cosmic geography now. I'll get back to that. Therefore, its name was called Galit. Also Mitzpah, which means watch or watchtower, because he said, may Yahweh watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar which I've placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abram, the God of Nahor, and the God of their father judge between us. And you see that I have the God, God, God. I don't know. I don't quite understand why the King James has this in capitals, making it seem like the same God, right? So usually God of Nahor would be, okay. So, and this is, I don't know if I have it. I probably do. Yeah, I get back to that. Okay. So from another commentary, separation. And this person called it separation covenant next. With this agreement, Jacob did not form a tie with Laban, but quite the opposite. He dissolved the union they had in the past. In other words, Jacob divorced from Laban's clan. The heap of stones was to be a sign of the borderline that was not to be passed over. This borderline represents the separation of the house of Jacob from the family of Nahor, Bethuel, and Laban. Each of them called the place of the covenant with a different name. Both words have the same meaning, but are from two different languages. That should always click something. Aramaic from Haran and Hebrew from Israel. The pile of stones therefore marks a frontier, and it is to have a different meaning depending on which side you're on. Even though both names have the same meaning, they are seen from a different perspective. On one side is Laban's clan and Haran, and on the other is Jacob and the house of Israel. This is a very important stage in the history of Israel. So, and we must remember here, the patriarchs had considered their kindred living in Haran as their family. They considered Haran as a place of refuge, and the next place of refuge would be Egypt, when they were in trouble, and also as a source of wives for their children. Both Abram and Isaac kept ties that bound them to their kindred. However, a final separation resulted from Jacob's decision. After spending 20 years with them, the separation is sealed with the covenant between Jacob and Laban. From that moment on, any link between them is cut off. The heap of stones, the gal, serves as a witness of this divorce. It marks a physical frontier between the families. And here is the last time the family of Nahor and Laban is mentioned in the Bible. After cutting off their family roots, the house of Jacob is born, Israel, which would later be called the house of Israel. The last verse in this chapter and the first verse in the following emphasize the separation between both family lines. Genesis 31:55. And early in the morning, Laban arose, kissed his sons and daughters, blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. And then it continues, 31. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him, and so on. Both men were standing on the same mount, but each descended from it in an opposite direction. After the separation covenant, each went to his own place. They never saw each other again. So that's the end of this. Okay. So now I want to make some points here. And Jacob, that's verse 53. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Okay. This is a unique term that only appears here. Jacob is not swearing by the God of Abram, because that is what Laban used. The God of Abram, the God of Nahor, the God of their fathers, all in one. Okay, so Jacob did not do that. So that's one. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning, Laban rose and kissed, and so on. Kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. Okay. No mention of Jacob. No blessing for Jacob. Laban seems to completely ignore Jacob. And this is in stark contrast to their first meeting. We have put things together. Genesis 29:13 and 14. Then it came to pass when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him into his house. So he told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. So we have two bookends here that bracket Jacob's time with Laban in Padan Aram. And the last chapter of this family affair closes here, and it doesn't end on a very positive note. The relationship has turned sour. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. At this point, the family from Padan Aram disappears from the biblical record. So this ends here. So now we have a problem. Why? Jacob has 12 sons. So where do they get their wives from now that the Padan Aram family connection is completely cut off? That door is closed. Okay. Jacob's sons and his entourage, whoever was with them, well, witnesses and party to the covenant. This may be the reason why the sons of Jacob did not go to Haran to find wives. As they all participated in the covenant meal that sealed the covenant, they too were bound by the prohibition against crossing beyond the boundary stones. Another question would be, who were they going to marry? Laban, meanwhile, while Jacob was there, had 2 sons. So the sons were younger than Jacob's sons, at least the older ones. But then these sons would have to have daughters available, right? So, okay, Padan Aram is done, the door is closed. So, and this may be the reason why they married Canaanite women, of whom Tamar may have and probably was the first, but not the only. The sons of Jacob at that point were small in number, and no law against intermarriage was given yet. Okay. So, now more, bigger picture. Our cosmic undercurrent, which is always there. So what does it mean? There is this cosmic undercurrent always present behind the scenes on a deeper level of the narrative, which puts the actual narrative into God's much bigger picture, purpose, and plan. And we have clues of the bigger picture. Here in this passage, cosmic lines are drawn between the family of God and the nations. Here, concrete, between the family of Jacob and the family of Laban in Mesopotamia. These cosmic lines, that is indicated here by the setting up of border stones that mark the territories between nations and peoples and their gods. Then another language clue is the use of different languages. This is another indicator of the separation, which should take us back to the rebellion at the Tower of Babel, where the different languages come from. So the point is, we must never lose sight of the bigger picture, the cosmic plan that goes beyond the actual story we are reading. This story is just a tiny piece of the bigger picture, of the bigger plan. Okay? So, why is the Tamar story so important? Why is Tamar important? That's the point. That is the point. So, the genealogy of Yeshua. Nobody likes genealogies. I get that. But there is always, always, always something important hidden. But that you will only be able to see if you know something about the story behind some of these names. So, next. Matthew. I have that, right? Yes. Matthew 1, 3-5. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Aminadab. Aminadab begot Nachshon. Nachshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. David the king begot Salmon by her, who was the wife of, which is not in the text, of Uriah. And that was Bathsheba, but she's not named. Okay, so we have Tamar, we have Rahab, Ruth, we have, not Ruth, we have Tamar, we have Rahab, and we have Bathsheba. From the Story of God commentary, Ruth, of course, as well, yes. Famously, the Matthew genealogy also mentions Tamar as one of the 4 women who are mothers of ancestors of Jesus. Besides Tamar, they include Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. All 4 are almost certainly foreign, with Tamar and Rahab being Canaanite, Ruth a Moabite, and Bathsheba a Hittite. Their mention shows that the line that leads to Jesus is not an ethnically pure one, but includes people from other nations. All 4 women also have sexual pasts that are troubled in one sense or another, even if only by perception in the case of Ruth. Tamar gave birth to Perez and Zerah as a result of her deception of Judah. Ruth offered herself sexually to Boaz on the threshing floor before they were formally married. Rahab was a prostitute, but Sheva slept with David while she was married to another man. But here we can say, okay, she was forced because the king commanded it. Jesus did not come from a long line of ethically pure ancestors, but from women and men who were ethically compromised in one way or another. Further, even if it is only by perception, Mary, an unmarried pregnant woman, would have had questions surrounding her sexual purity. And this is what you find in the Midrash, how they drag her in the mud. Okay. Rahab, and I'll end with this. Rahab is a special case, and she's especially important. According to Matthew's genealogy, Rahab married Salmon, a prince of the tribe of Judah and the son of Nachshon, and became the mother of Boaz. The text describes Salmon as a member of the royal lineage of Judah, and their union is significant as it led to the line of King David and ultimately to Messiah Yeshua. Some rabbinic traditions and midrashic sources suggest that Rahab married Joshua instead. Joshua was a Ephraimite, okay? You see why they say this, right? Joshua instead, but the New Testament here disagrees. These traditions, though influential in later Jewish thought, probably post-Yeshua, are not supported by the biblical text itself, okay? The marriage to Salmon is presented as a pivotal moment in Rahab's transformation from a Canaanite prostitute to a respected ancestor in the lineage of Messiah, because she married an Israelite, and she would then submit to the God of Israel. Okay? And the IVP commentary says, ancient genealogies usually omitted women, but Matthew includes 4 women, though Matthew omits the 4 matriarchs prominent in Jewish tradition: Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel. Thus, he hints from the Old Testament that God has always planned a mission to all peoples, yet Jews emphasize their pure ancestry. Has anything like that ever existed? That is the question. Okay, and I say amen and amen. And I got it all.